I am the reflection of the past. I am history incarnate. This city on the banks of the Narmada has a history that goes back far in time. Along the beautiful broad banks of the holy Narmada stand forts, temples and mosques that are breathtakingly beautiful and whose saga are unbelievable. Yes, this is Maheshwar.
Maheshwar, the city of Mahishmati, is 90 kilometers to the south of Indore in the western Nimad district of Madhya Pradesh. This city has been a mute witness to the passage of time. Stone implements dating back to prehistoric times lie scattered around. Do you see those hills? At that period, the inhabitants probably lived there. According to legends, Yaduputra Muchkund was the founder of this city. It was conquered by Hayhaya Mahishman, and since then it was known after him. In the 8th century, the famous commentator Mandan Mishra and his erudite wife Bharati Devi dwelt here. It was to this very city that Shankaracharya came to debate with Mandan Mishra. It regained its splendor during the reign of the Parmar kings, and the Mughal period saw the fortification of this town as well as the renovation of its temples. However, when Rajmata Ahilyabai Holkar made Maheshwar her capital, this city got a new identity. She was instrumental in restoring several temples and ancient buildings. It was then that the temples on the ghats were constructed. She invited learned men, sculptors and weavers to come and settle in Maheshwar, and once again the city recaptured its past glory. But today the same Maheshwar has slipped into a dullness with no evidence of progress or development. Today there is only one topic worth discussing: the dam to be constructed across the Narmada. But how this will affect the future of Maheshwar is not clear to very many people. This fort, these banks, these temples and these cenotaphs or chhatris of Maheshwar are excellent examples of architecture. Geographically secure, this fort at Maheshwar is very old. However, the vestiges of the Parmar period are visible only in the fortification walls and gateways. The rest of the structure belongs to the Mughal period. The small turrets and the gate to the eastern side are Mughal, but the upper portion, constructed of bricks, is of the Maratha period. Devi Ahilyabai Holkar made Maheshwar her capital in 1767. This Bada was her residence. The cenotaphs and temples here are excellent examples of sculpture.
Though the tradition of erecting chhatris dates back to 13th and 14th centuries, yet monuments which reveal man's desire to be remembered forever were even built thousands of years ago. The Buddhists built stupas over the mortal remains of their dead, and the Muslim rulers constructed mausoleums. The Taj Mahal is the best example. Taking inspiration from them, the Marathas and the Rajputs erected chhatris to remember their dear ones. Devi Ahilyabai built chhatris to commemorate her daughter Muktabai and son-in-law Yashwant Phanse. At around the same time, chhatris in honor of Malerao, Khanderao and Malharrao Holkar I were built in Chhatri Bagh, Indore.
The chhatris at Maheshwar are wonderful examples of sculpture. They are living symbols of Maratha art. This chhatri was erected in memory of Ahilyabai's daughter Muktabai and her son-in-law Yashwantrao Phanse. The chhatri has been built on a high plinth on which one can find sculpture of the first order. The Garbhagriha is octagonal with arched doorways and a Pradakshina path. The shikhar has been constructed with bricks. This dome-shaped shikhar belongs to a later period. The chhatri was constructed in the later half of the 18th century. Its arched doorways, pillars, and the construction of todi is in the Rajput style. The walls of the Garbhagriha have trellis work, and the Pradakshina path bear figures of dancers and musicians. The panels on the plinth are bordered with floral motifs and display warring elephants. These are mute witness to the sculptor's skills. Mithuna couples, heavenly ladies, women playing musical instruments, mother and child, abhisarikas, alasnaikas, and other figures decorate the plinth. On the banks of the Narmada, within the Maheshwar fort, in a courtyard enclosed by the fortification walls, is the grand chhatri dedicated to Devi Ahilyabai. Ahilyabai passed away in 1795, and this cenotaph was raised in her memory by Yashwantrao Holkar in 1800. The majestic doorway, embellished with small cells and balconies, is breathtakingly beautiful. This chhatri seems to have been constructed according to the rules laid down for the construction of temples. Its ground plan includes the Mukh Mandap, Mandap, Antaral, and the Garbhagriha, which are features generally found in temples. In the elevation above the plinth are the Adhishtan, Vedivant, Jangha, and Shikhar. Outside the Garbhagriha, on the Rathika, on three sides, there are structures resembling chhatris. The second Jangha, constructed below the Shikhar, gives it the appearance of being double-storied. That is, the Shikhar or spire rests on the second Jangha. This Shikhar in the Naga style bears Urushringa. The Garbhagriha is rectangular. Devi Ahilyabai's statue stands behind the Shivling, which occupies the middle of the Sanctum Sanctorum. On the panel above the doorway, the 10 incarnations of Lord Vishnu are carved, and Ganesh finds place on the Lalat Bimb. The mandap is held up by 16 pillars. On three sides are Mukh Mandaps resting on 2 pillars each. The pillars are decorated in the Maratha style and joined together to form a row of arches. At the top of the pillars, there are mythological figures, but these have been executed in the Maratha style. Figures of Ram, Gopi Krishna, Varah, Narasimha, Venugopal, other incarnations of Lord Vishnu, celestial nymphs, as well as of royal personalities, find place here. The sculptor has loosened the reins of his imagination in the representation of human emotions and various rasas. These figures are surpassingly beautiful. Facing Ahilyabai's chhatri is the chhatri on a high jagati dedicated to the memory of Vittal Rao Holkar. There's a story about it. Maharaja Yashwantrao Holkar I's brother, Vittal Rao, was trampled to death at the orders of the Peshwa. Yashwantrao mounted an assault on the Peshwas to avenge his brother's death and defeated him. He then had this beautiful chhatri erected in the memory of Vittal Rao. This chhatri's adhishtan is about 10 feet higher than its rear portion. On the walls of the adhishtan can be seen beautifully carved figures of elephants. Leaves, flowers, and the lotus motif are exquisitely represented. There's a beautiful composition which shows elephants performing the Abhishek for Mahalakshmi. The sanctum sanctorum is octagonal and the circumambulatory path has arched windows which are highly ornamented. The shikhar is dome-shaped. This is the chhatri dedicated to Bule Sarkar. The Holkar and Bolia families were related to each other through marriage ties. This chhatri is a proof of that relation. The Garbhagriha is octagonal. The Pradakshina Path, Mandap and Mukh Mandap stand on pillars. Flowers, leaves and creepers embellish the plinth, the walls and the pillars. The Rajput influence can be found in the Toran, Illika and arches in between the pillars. The shikhar is dome-shaped.
According to the Hindu philosophy, the ultimate aim of life is release or moksha. The temples and statues are stages of this approach to moksha. The deity in a temple is symbolic of this approach. The statues are manifestation of the deity through a concrete work of art, which is the murti, and the building is its body and house. Thus, temples are halting places providing rest and support in the course of our journey towards integration with the Absolute.
Maheshwar is famous for its temples, and these have their own style and individual histories. The Kaleshwar temple to the east of Maheshwar, at the confluence of the two rivers Maheshwari and Narmada, is surrounded by fortification walls. It is difficult to trace its antiquity due to the renovation work undertaken during the Mughal period. The Jaleshwar temple lies in ruins on the hillock situated on the left bank of the Maheshwari river. The Keshav temple in the Chaukhandi Mohalla is huge and stands on a double plinth. The layout of the temple comprises of the Mukh Mandap, Mandap, Antaral and Garbhagriha. The shikhar is in the Nagar style. The Vedivand in the elevation are covered with khur, kumbh Kalash, and Kapotikas. Figures of gods and goddesses appear on each of the raths on the janga of this Pancharathi temple. The mandap stands on pillars The temple appears to have been constructed in the 14th century. It reflects the Khajuraho style. The Kashi Vishwanath temple was built during Devi Ahilyabai's reign. The ground plan for this temple includes the Mukh Mandap, Antaral and Garbhagriha. This Trirathi temple has an austerely simple exterior. The shikhar is in the Nagar style. Apart from the temples of Maheshwar mentioned earlier, the Shiv temple, the Matangeshwar Ghat, the Rajrajeshwar temple, the Pandarinath temple are of special interest since their construction or renovation was undertaken in the 18th century.
Some of the temples at Maheshwar date back to the 13th and 14th centuries. However, the renovation work done on them have destroyed the antiquity of these temples. Notable among these are the temples at Kaleshwar, Matangeshwar and Rajrajeshwar. During the 14th century, the local influences were incorporated in the temple architecture, and even traces of the Bhumij style of the Parmar period can be seen. In the 16th century, only renovation work was undertaken. There were no new constructions of temples. But during the 18th century, renovation as well as construction of temples were undertaken at a large scale. At this time, the Marathas reverted back to the ancient temple architectural norms and thus added a significant chapter. Mythological engravings found place on the temple walls, and in the 19th century, this sculptural style was reproduced on the walls of the chhatris. A noteworthy example is the chhatri dedicated to Devi Ahilyabai Holkar.
Maheshwar is famous for this grandeur, but is equally well known for its cultural, political and religious ethos. Devi Ahilyabai had nurtured this place as an industrial center as well. For this purpose, skilled craftsmen and weavers were invited here from Gujarat and Mandal. Maheshwari saris are incomparable for their simple yet artistic designs which display the originality of the weavers. These saris are woven on local looms, but the cotton yarn comes from distant parts of the country. Maheshwar is famous for its saris, but it is unfortunate that this ancient historical town could not flourish as it should have. The residents hope to develop it as a tourist resort. Will their dreams be realized?